Bene, signore e signori, bentornati o ben arrivati se siete nuovi in questa sala per oggi.
Welcome back for the afternoon session. Thank you for being with us. Let's continue with the presentation of our projects of Interreg cooperation between Italy and Slovenia. Quite a few have been presented so far. We'll continue on the same line for the afternoon, and we will continue with the third group. As I told you, that I can make the introduction in two languages, just myself, English and Slovene, and for the rest you can rely on our interpreters.
Hvala, da ste ponovno z nami, če ste se vrnili v našo družbo. Hvala vseeno, če ste prvič v naši družbi. Sledijo torej predstavitve raznih projektov sodelovanja Interreg med Italijo in Slovenijo. Nekaj smo jih že odkrili v prvem delu dneva, nekaj jih bomo v nadaljevanju tega našega dogodka. E allora quindi vi chiedo un applauso per i prossimi protagonisti su questo palco, l'asset numero 3.
Okay, let's welcome the participants in our third panel, environment. We have here the project P Diversity and Bluegrass. Welcome. P Diversity on my left, Bluegrass. Three of you on the other side. Welcome. Now, this morning, many of us on stage, we will be quite a few also for the afternoon. Are the microphones working? Yes. Red light, it's on. Red light is on. Please keep the microphone close to your mouth and don't cover the antenna, because then this causes a communication problem. Everything is fine, it seems. Yes, please feel free to join us and take part in our talk. Now, bees are unpredictable as ever, and this is the start of our talk that has to do with bees and beekeeping. I will switch to Italian now. Silvano Cosalti of Bee Diversity for this project, introducing our two guests on his side. Dr. Antonella Strabisi from Pordenone. A biologist that cooperates with us for many aspects. And Dr. Martino Rasero, working for Veneto Agricoltura, who has been cooperating with us ever since the beginning of the project. With reference to the technical and management part of the project. Thank you for the introduction. Let's continue with you. Let's start with something very concrete, with something real, something that you brought in the room here near. You carried with you a technological beehive. So let's try to understand more in your project. Yes, what you have seen in the room nearby is a technological beehive. So we didn't bring a space ship or shuttle, but just a very normal beehive that is equipped with technologies to have real-time data that can be controlled remotely. These technologies are a pair of scales underneath the beehive, counter for the flights of bees, so measuring the number of flights undertaken daily by the bees, and then internal sensors measuring the temperature in the season, in the summer, in the winter, for the various bee families, the brood, etc. And then so that we can guarantee a good quality of life for the beehive. And then there's a sensor for rain, informing me whether it's wet or dry. I'm sure you are all aware that the bees play a vital role in this project, and the idea is to improve biodiversity thanks to the innovative management of ecosystems and proper management of the bees themselves. So what exactly did you do? What studies? What did you measure? So what's the essence of the project? So why did we select the bees? Well, bees are insects which can be monitored simply because we breed them. We keep them in hives, in houses, so they can be monitored. We cannot monitor as well pronuptial insects, for which it is very difficult to gather data. It's very easy to measure this data for bees. And bees can inform us about the quality of life of the environment in which they live. In Natura 2000 areas especially, and that's why we have developed activities concerning the capacity of us to manage properly these areas in a proper and safe way. Bees are indicator telling us whether agricultural activities in the various territories covered by the project, whether our activities are carried out properly or not. Bees will give us back a signal of whether the situation is good or not. So if I understood correctly, there are several areas in Italy and Slovenia. And so how healthy are these areas? Well, there are different areas. In the Veneto region, it's a coastal area with many cereals, so it's very flat, although in the course of the years it has been, let's say, wildlife has been brought back. It's the eastern part of the province of Venice. The other areas, as in Friuli, Venezia Giulia, along the river, right and left of the river Tagliamento, and with reference to the University of Udine, also some areas monitored are in Karst, and then other areas in the Ljubljana area, covered by the University of Ljubljana, and the upper part of Slovenia near the city of Kranj and Bled, where agriculture is completely different, with a lot of animal breeding, sheep, etc. Now, let me hear also the testimony of the other colleagues. Dr. Stravisi, would you like to add? So, in your opinion, how did things go? What was your contribution to the project? So, what kind of work did you do? Well, directly, I was involved in the technical interface that had to do with the management of some technical aspects related to the project. In particular, the technological Polo Tecnologico, organized or set up a specific app for the phone, allowing a remote connection for the data collected in these technological hives. So beekeepers or the association of beekeepers or consortia, etc., they can keep an eye in real time or nearly real time all the data concerning the technological hives. These data can be very important in management terms, both to prevent specific problems or to intervene with timeliness in case of need. Making reference here to sudden deaths of bees, but also the proper management of the beehive, so on the part of the beekeeper. For instance, remote control of temperature provides us with a very good indication about the viability of the colony, the acceptance of a queen, the fact that the queen is still alive, or the effect of specific treatments. And this is something that we've seen by monitoring temperature, especially by comparing internal and exterior temperature. So without opening up the hive, or even if the hive seems healthy because there are many bees incoming and outgoing, but by monitoring the temperature remotely, we can understand whether there's a problem going on or something is not okay. So this measurement allows us to set specific alert messages, which then help me to intervene and to standardize or intervene and take measures, take actions for a proper management of the beehives. Thank you to our technologies, which allows us to do great things, in this case, for the beehives. It's very, very helpful in this case to tackle several problems and to makes our life easier because we have so many data that we can intervene. Dr. Razera, what was your role and your conclusions? How did you participate in this project? Thank you. So I was into the management of all the devices for the electronic technological beehive, monitoring online of all the data, and the several aspects that have been mentioned so far. At the end, the question is to all of you. The health status of the bees in this area and of the entire environment. What are the news? Can we be hopeful for the future, or is the health of the bees a problem? Well, the reply is complex, not easy. We can certainly say that in general, and I'm sure that I'm not telling you anything news, climate change and other environmental aspects, man-made aspects, these phenomena have greatly reduced the number of pronuptial insects available in nature. This is very often related to man-made activities, pollution, but also the changes that we brought about in the environment. These pronuptial insects need proper blossomings, and the more flowers there are, if we think about the old landscapes with grassland full of flowers, natural flowers, with vines and trees, all of this doesn't exist because we tend to have monocultures only. Now, monocultures are very bad for specific insects, including the bees. If dealing with bees, the situation is a bit different because we breed bees, so we can manage them, we can change the way that we breed them. So this is no longer natural, it's man-made. But it's difficult to have the right form of agriculture. The last years have been very hard for beekeepers with a lot of rain, very rainy spring, which damaged the blossoming season in Italy and Slovenia. This year, the contrary, a lot of drought, very dry season, lack of rain, so we had to intervene to feed the bees, give them water. This has an impact on the costs. But bees are being bred, we can have an impact. We can change things. We can help them. In a totally natural environment, things are different. Anything else you would like to add? Because we are running late, of course. I will give you the floor at the end for one word of conclusion. So think if you want to add anything. You can stay with us. Thank you, Dr. Razera. Let's move on to the other projects selected within Asset 3, again under the heading Environment. Environment, Bluegrass, Mr. Daniele Brigolin, Tiziana Ferin, and Mr. Marco Francese. Welcome to all of you. Applaud. Bluegrass implies promoting the development of green agri-food with the introduction of agri-ponics. Agri-ponics, no idea what it is. We have to find out what it is. Let's try to be serious, to provide rich information. What is aquaponics? And especially, what are the benefits for the agriculture in general and for all of us? Thank you. Good morning. Well, let me try to reply in 2 words. Aquaponics is an integrated production technique. It means that we end up producing vegetables with aquaponic agriculture, so out of the soil. We're using fish which is bred in closed systems. When I say closed, is because they recycle water, they purify the water and re-inject it in the system. So what does this mean? This system for the production of fish, so this system have to be managed. There is accumulation of substances that are not very good for fish, such as nitrates. These substances can be, on the contrary, very helpful for plants. So what becomes waste in the fishery can then become a positive substance to produce vegetable. This is to cut a very long story short. Of course, this has specific difficulties and problems from a technological point of view and management point of view. Well, so let's see, how did you apply these technological and management aspects within your project, which, if I understood correctly, took place in Koper, Capodistria, in 2 different companies, Koper and in Friuli. Yes, indeed. The project started from the encounter between the University of Venice, for which I work, and the University of Ljubljana. So the first deals a lot with aquaculture, the second deals with horticulture, vegetable growing. So the encounter, when we met, we decided to involve 2 companies, 2 facilities, one for fish in Italy and KZ Agriculture for Slovenia, fish and vegetables. And then and a trout breeder in the municipality of Porcia, close to the town of Pordenone. So, and he said that he was available for experimenting with our system. So we came up with prototypes. Unfortunately, we couldn't bring them here because they are huge, not as big as this room, but very big, of course. In Porcia, we had a closed prototype, but mobile, it can be moved. Whereas in the other company, we were working inside one of the greenhouses, which were already present at this facility. So the 2 systems, once installed, and this happened during the first year of the project, this system have been used for about 1 year to monitor, gather data, 1 year and a half actually, to monitor the functioning of the system. We've been very glad to work on this because we really needed to understand the difficulty of understanding a coupled system, that is a system which can work with either function. There are huge difficulties in terms of maintenance, a proper setting of the parameters. But as the colleague said before, then technology can come in very helpful. So monitoring systems of continuous monitoring. So the user or the technician is always present at the plant. and we have to comply with many different management protocols. This is one of the main difficulties indeed. And then secondly, from a technological point of view, again, to develop the activity, has been checking its sustainability from the environmental viewpoint. Aquaponics as a system, as for the way it is presented, it is extremely sustainable, but we wanted to measure quantitatively the analysis of the cycle of life, the life cycles, and establish exactly what are the main advantages and disadvantages, so which are the steps connected to the maintenance, management, proper use of energy, water, anything that is used to the proper functioning of the plant. And talking about advantages and disadvantages, we ended up with many advantages. Of course, in the light of the current situation, rising energy prices, there are some question marks. So the moment we ended the project, we also confronted ourselves with foreign partners working on the same aspect. And currently, the main point of interest is optimizing, i.e., reducing the cost of energy. Now, having said this, and in parallel to this project, we also developed an activity to involve, first of all, communication with the communities, the territories. We have attempted to involve the agriculture and aquaculture operators to explain to them advantages and disadvantages. And on this, we can give the microphone to the colleague. Yes, so activating a network of stakeholders. Please say something. Yes, good afternoon. As Daniele was saying, it was very important to involve the social fabric around us, the people, to understand to what extent people were interested. So, was there a practical implication, yes or no? And also to have their feedback. That's the reason why we devoted a lot of energy in recruiting stakeholders. 295 persons in the end with a real interest. But we contacted 1,000, a huge work. We received phone calls. We had to be in contact with all of them. It's been a huge effort to involve and have people participate. And very often, when you attempt to involve people, there is not much interest. But the idea is to find the right people, and we organized two working groups in the beginning, one in Italy, one in Slovenia, before involving everybody. And we invited external experts, producers, so as to have a lot of contribution on how the pilot projects were organized. We wanted to start with the right foot. And then we organized seminars with different targets, producers or final users. And there again, we found very interesting things. We also received many visits, people that came to visit our plant. And we organized a very interesting seminar, final conference, with a huge participation on the standards, on the norms. The various professional associations, the ministry, people of the sector in general, all of them spoke in favor of these technologies. And we said that we have to favor small local productions, one-stop shops, how to help people interested in investing in this type of production, considering the initial cost. So in general, this has been a parallel pathway which functioned very well with great efficiency. So Communication and efficient communication was managed by Tiziana. Communication with respect to bluegrass, yes, communication indeed was focusing on 3 different targets. So we had the scientific community on the one hand, since the project is led by a university. Then the part of the producers, agriculture and fishery, and then final users. So 3 different targets with 3 different communication strategies, so as to explain aquaponics to everyone. In terms of products, at the end, I think that the videos that you show around were all very different. So a small video explaining with images, with pictures, what Daniele explained verbally, what is aquaponics, then another video lasting 6 minutes, entering more into the details for those that are interested in production and possible investment in the aquaponics, so with technical details. And then the final publications, it's here. For those who are interested, there are many copies available because our communication strategy actually coincided with the COVID pandemics, and in the end it was much more difficult to do things, so we could only organize things online. In terms of events, these events were very different depending whether we wanted to involve the academia or consumers and final users, because of course for final users understanding aquaponics is not easy. So we organized guided tour to the pilot project for the schools to raise awareness among the students. We explained the concept of circular economy. It was important to focus on production systems, sustainability. And then we work with social cooperatives to give different angles, thinking about possible employment in the sector of aquaponics. So why not diversify in a sector that usually have very few opportunities? And then behind projects there are always people, but a lot depends on the commitment and the effort of people. And I think one of the best things that we organized, which really contributed to the network among the various stakeholders, was the aquaponic bus. We organized guided tour to our pilot project in Slovenia and Italy. We took one single bus traveling from Pordenone to Ljubljana, stopping here and there, with people getting on and off here and there, sharing, traveling together, and having the time during the journey to discuss, ask questions, and we all ended up feeling very young, as if we had been on a school trip. Thank you very much for sharing your history with our public. Thank you very much for being here. So Daniele, Silvano, thank you. Just like this morning, maybe we can conclude with one quick reflection, one piece of advice, one word, something in conclusion. What do you want to, a short message? Or if you have forgotten something very important, feel free to say it now. So, the conclusion. So, I explained everything in the first part. So, if you're interested, please come and visit our stand here outside, where you can find material and explanation on the project. But I wanted to explain better a few aspects that I didn't have the time to do it earlier. The project was not just on the use of an electronic beehive. There were other objectives. For instance, a manual of agricultural best practices for a better management of the territories in the Natura 2000 sites. As you've understood, We have different areas, completely different. So you will find different good practices, manuals, specific for every territory in the project. Please come and visit us at the stand, and you will find a summary of the entire project. And then a final word for Bluegrass, Daniele Gregolin. Yes. So unfortunately, we ended the project when the COVID arrived, but I think this project allowed us to understand advantages and disadvantages of these systems and to identify a few specific needs on the part of consumers and producers. We have already mentioned legislation. Another interesting aspect has to do with diversification of production, so river fish or lagoon fish, etc. And then the point on energy, the rising cost of energy. And then we decided to continue studying and researching on this. So, of course, we can expect many more things from here onwards, many things to study, understand, and improve. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Bee diversity and bluegrass. Thank you. Two projects devoted to the environment. Thank you to all of you. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
So,
And now we move on with the next chapter, the next axis, devoted to governance. And I'm going back to two languages for my introduction to this last axis. We have 4 projects, 5, I apologize, with various guest speakers also among the audience. C3B Crosscare, Geocast Fortis, and Salute Strausto. Please take seat here on the podium. Now, it takes a while. You didn't listen to me, did you? I was telling you where to sit. I'll be coming to you. Otherwise, I would have to have all of you here on the podium, and there's no space for all of you. Just move one on the side. Now we need a European project to try and have all the people seated here on the podium. Given that there are many other speakers for the individual projects, then I will hand over the mic to the first row, and then I'll ask you to come here to the podium to address the audience. It's like being a movie director today. I'm enjoying it. Now, the one that you heard is not my watch, but I am just measuring time. We only have 45 minutes. No, it is my watch. Sorry. I apologize. So, 45 minutes. But let's move on. I hand over the mic to the first project, Claudio Tiribelli, C3B. This is a cross-border platform for the effective management of biobanks. Now, good afternoon, first of all. You have colleagues of yours seated in the first row. We will hear from them later on. Now, the world of biobanks, what it is, what is a biobank, first of all? It's a warehouse, just like a bank. It's a warehouse of biological materials. And they are all filed and connected with the biological data. And these materials can be extremely valuable to provide answers that otherwise would take years. Now, before describing the project to us, tell us, what's the situation here in the cross-border area when it comes to biobanks? Can we compete? Can we compete with the large professional biobanks or not? Well, I believe that biobanks should not be seen just in terms of the number of samples that they store. Absolutely not. I believe that a biobank, or rather this cross-border area, has a major advantage. Veneto, Friuli Venezia Giulia, and Slovenia all together have the same number of inhabitants of the Lombardy region, which is the most industrialized in Italy. And if we group together our competencies, our skills, if we do some capacity building, we can have a very well-organized project. And this is exactly what C3B is doing. We're putting together many biobanks, and the lead partner is the Oncological Center in Aviano, because there are many biobanks, but on their own, they don't have a framework to be effective. Slovenia has created its own system of biobanks and can take advantage of all the previous experiences that we have already had with the European legislation. Veneto has a major biobank in Venice, and that could be the third leg, the third pillar of a system. How this system, how much competitive this could be at national level, certainly. At world level, it could be. The problem is not the number of samples, but how the samples, the biological materials, are collected, harvested, labeled, stored, preserved, never below 80 degrees centigrade, and used. So what did you do? How did you set up this network? We made it possible for these three different pillars to talk to each other. It could seem easy, but it was not. And they were able to talk to each other. The process was successful, still successful. The project ends in April next year. The PI, the principal investigator, is Mr. Pascutti, and I'd like to give him the floor then so that we can hear more about the technical side of this project. Was very busy in creating a network. These three institutions were very cooperative, and despite the huge bureaucracy that we had to cope with within Interreg, I insist science as one language, which is English. And for me, it is useless to have two languages that are not English. But this is my personal position. Nevertheless, we are convinced that this process has all the prerequisites to be carried on and be further capitalized, because this is one of the projects selected by the European Union as one of the three best European projects. I have the names of your collaborators. Should we give them the floor? I give the floor to them. Could you please come here to the podium?
Però ha citato un altro nome.
You mentioned another name as well. Microsoft is off. Jerry Pascutti, but I think the mic of the speaker is off. Okay.
In italiano perché
Now I continue in Italian. Oh, you're a gentleman. Dr. Resen, Turin, which is the job that you carried out within this project? And which is the most important element of this cross-border project, setting up this network between Italy, Slovenia, and the Veneto region with Friuli Venezia Giulia? The mic is not on. The mic is not on. The mic is not working. Okay. Now, I come from the Transfusion Medicine Institute. So good afternoon. I represent the Slovenian Institute for Transfusional Medicine. We have a blood bank there at national level, which is also internationally accredited. We have all the good practices being implemented there, and we wanted to have a biobank of biological samples. In line with the European legislation, we tried to verify which organizations dealt with biobanks. We tried to verify what the need for these samples could be. And then we started purchasing the necessary instruments, machineries. We submitted a request to the bioethical committee in Slovenia, and we started collecting these samples that will then be distributed to all those who need these samples for research purposes, education purposes, not just nationally, but also in the whole program area. I think the protocols that are currently being used on both sides of the border could be further harmonized. And by so doing, we could enlarge our scale of cooperation. We could have also a greater number of biological samples available if we join our efforts. This is a very important concept, harmonization, but we don't have much time available. I thank Dr. Churin together with Dr. Lesa. And now the applause first, and we move on to the next project. Let's move on to the next project, Cross Care, Francesco Mosetti. Integrated cross-border project for the elderly. Again, a very topical issue. What are the main elements of your project? A general presentation, therefore, of your project. Now, the first thing that comes to my mind is that today is the International Day of the Alzheimer's disease. We now celebrate this disease. And this is something that CrossCare has been trying to work on. And it has developed a cross-border protocol for Alzheimer's disease. The care of these fragile patients and the care especially of patients with dementia-like diseases has been our objective. And we wanted to move from a more artisanal type of care to a more professional one. We selected more than 500 different healthcare givers. We studied the protocols for Alzheimer's diseases. The healthcare givers have shared the two most important international protocols, the validation and gentle care protocols that are available in the international literature. There are two complementary approaches. And we've educated them with these two protocols to help not just the healthcare givers, but also the families taking care of these patients. We want to have an impact not just on the healthcare givers, but also on the families, because we want to support the caregiver, the family caregivers, because they have a daunting task in taking care of the members of their family suffering from dementia-like diseases. First of all, we provided them with very clear information. Very often, the families confronted with these fragile patients don't know where to turn to. Sometimes They look for information where information is not there, or sometimes receive contradictory pieces of information. So the first thing that we did is to create a clear information. We have set up information points within elderly homes. In Italy and in Slovenia, these elderly homes is where families turn to when they need help. And by setting up this information point, we could provide information to the families. And let me say something. Before cross-care, which were the differences when it comes to taking care of these patients? Were there differences? Yes, there were differences. The first difference was that the assessment system was different. Now we have a single assessment system for these patients. Now, to try and understand how severe the condition of a given patient is, well, each region in Italy has its own system. Now, with Slovenia, we have a single system. Slovenia was about to introduce its own multidimensional screening and assessment system, and we were able to come right at the right time. The health ministry of Slovenia was involved, and we succeeded in developing a single assessment system, which we now share, Friuli Venezia Giulia, Veneto, with some difficulty there, and Slovenia. And the other difficulty is to have clear data in both languages for the different assessment scales. Even family members who do not know anything about certain medical words were able to understand whether there was an improvement or a worsening of the condition of the patient, because the representation of the patient was very clear. Anna, no, she's not here. She was supposed to come, but she couldn't in the end. And I know in Europe we have an aging population. The need is felt, and increasingly so, to have well-trained healthcare givers. I presume that your project is going on and you'll further develop it. Are you going to carry it on? Yes, absolutely. We hope that with this call, we'll be able to further consolidate what we have already achieved with the previous programming period. And especially, we hope to be able to use some more technology. We have been experimenting with some technologies at home of the patient to try and help family caregiver to understand what possible sentinel events are, like when the patient falls, when there are certain movements that are not normal movements, so that the family can be alerted about a worsening of the patient's condition. Technology is what may help us. As for the future, the problem raises of costs. If you have a project, of course, then you have the money. But if this technology is to be bought by private citizens, well, costs are still very high. And now we thank Francesco Mosetti from CrossCare. And we give the floor to another project, and we continue in Slovene. I give the time to the interpreters to switch languages. Now, ladies and gentlemen, Geokarst with Katia Fedrigo. She's here with me. We're talking about the setting up of a cross-border geological park. The work is still ongoing. A lot has been done. Now, first of all, I'd like to know what a geopark is. What do you mean with geopark? Now, good afternoon. We're still working on setting up a geopark, and we are very much confident. A geopark is an area. It's a typical karst area. And from the geological viewpoint, the classical karst area plays a very important role. It's a very specific type of terrain. I know that karst soils exist everywhere in the world, but our karst is the largest one and the most important one. Geopark doesn't refer only to geology. Of course, geology is the starting point. Indeed, this area becomes a geopark because of the geological characteristics of the soil, but there are other features that do count. Geology is a unifying factor for many other elements. Geology tells us about how the karst was born, but in this area we have produce like the Terrano wine that is so typical because of the minerals that are found in the ground and are absorbed by the vines. When we use the word geopark, well, the word is associated with the protection measures, conservation measures, but it is not necessarily so. We are not introducing limitations or new forms of preservation of the area. We are rather taking care of the existing heritage in this area based on local needs. The geopark is a local initiative. This is why collaboration with the stakeholders is very much important. Now, you have told us about this geopark. We see a map of the park. But now I think there's a second step to be made, which is turn it into an operational reality with a program of activities. Yes, when we talk about capitalization of a project, this is indeed a nice example of capitalization. Indeed, behind the Geocast Park, well, we've been working for 20 years. It all started with the Carso Karst project, which was a cross-border project. Now, in the Geokarst, we draw from all the results of the previous projects, and we have in mind further development, which is Kras Karso 2, that has already been mentioned today by the managing authority. And activities are now being planned that will contribute to the sustainable development of this area, which is basically the most important goal of this project. Sustainable development for the benefit of the local populations. What can we say about your job within this project? Which were the obstacles? Which were the events? Well, to make this park alive, we need a management plan, and we need a harmonized governance of the park. In the Geocast process, there is a management plan already envisaged. Then we will formally set up the park. with the involvement of all the 17 municipalities that are involved. And then we have launched activities with young children and young people. When I said that we have to preserve the existing heritage, of course it is important to collaborate with our young people, with the schools. Within Geocast, we have organized a series of events on the park with the schools, and there is a whole week devoted to the Geo Park, and that will become a regular appointment. So each year we will have a week devoted to the park, usually end of May, beginning of June. Now, thank you, Katia Fedrigo. The floor is to your collaborator. Can you just tell us what your contribution has been? She is a representative of the regional government. Why is the cast so peculiar and so important? And why is there an impact on the local population? Now, as Katia was saying, in the cast area, well, that's the largest cast area in the world. That's where all cast researches were carried out. This is where it has been demonstrated that the cast is a very specific geological phenomenon. And this is where the first studies on this geology were performed. And kras, karst, karso, this is why the same word is used all over the world, despite the fact that there is a lot of karst soil in the world. But this is the classical karst geological formation. So this is a natural heritage of great value. We have many caves and grottos. We have the Scozian cave system, part of the UNESCO International Heritage since '86. Then we have the Timavo Rijeka River, which is a karst river. It goes underground in Slovenia and it comes up again here at the spring close to Duino in San Giovanni del Timavo. They are the most famous geosites that we have in this area. And these geosites are areas where we can better understand how our planet was born. And they're beautiful areas, not just from the viewpoint of landscape. Think about the Skocjanska cave. They're also very important from the scientific viewpoint, not just for their natural beauty, because they make us understand how our planet was created. And then we have this intermittent river disappearing in Skocjan cave and then coming up again in Duino. Thank you. Thank you. We don't have much time available. I know that we could go on talking about the cast for quite a while. Thank you for your contribution. Thank you, Sara, a geologist for the region of Friuli Venezia Giulia. And now I'm going back to Italian. And I thank Katia and Sara from the GeoCarst project. And I've given the floor to Anna Sinkovic, who's going to talk to us about the Fortis project. And then Mr. Salvato Cacciaguerra and Anna Ligrudic, they're also here, but we give the floor to Anna Sinkovic. Strengthening institutional cooperation in a cross-border area through innovative solutions in the field of sustainable mobility. I'd like to start with a very concrete evidence. I know that there is one more connection in between Koper and Trieste, which is already a success story. It's a concrete result. Can you tell us more? How did you think about this project? What you did? And the results you have achieved. Now, the Fortis project is belongs to this axis because it deals mainly with institutional cooperation, even though it has an impact on transportation. The objective was doing more by using less. We wanted to have one more connection in between Trieste and Koper. There was no service on Sunday, but we thought that maybe we needed one more connection on Sunday, so we now have this new connection from October to July, 3 times a day, connecting Trieste and Koper. Many obstacles we have to overcome because, you know, during COVID, all cross-border mobility came to a halt. So even our project was postponed. We had to test the service, but we couldn't do it because there were no passengers. Nevertheless, when it was possible to resume these connections, we had a positive reaction to this new service on Sunday. Various technical meetings were organized, and we decided to maintain this service on Sundays, as well as other connections all along the border between Slovenia and Italy. We will introduce further connection services on Sundays. On the one hand, we wanted to improve, as I said, infrastructural connections between the two sides of the border, and on the other, we wanted to harmonize administrative procedures on public transportations and traffic, because I think that is very much important. And up to this project, there was no cooperation whatsoever. And thanks to Fortis, we were able to group together various organizations and institutions. And I think we have two witnesses here whose contribution I think is going to be very important. But before, I have a question on other results that you have been able to achieve. You've developed an integrated bilateral ticket for these connections, which already existed, but you improved it, if I'm not wrong. Yes, we have this integrated ticket in between Trieste and Ljubljana. It comes from a previous project with Central Europe. We tested that integrated ticket. There was a bus connection at the time. And citizens arriving in Villa Officina could then reach Trieste by way of an integrated ticket. Again, COVID was a major obstacle because we couldn't test this integrated ticket. However, we studied other services that could be further integrated in the ticket to make it more interesting for both citizens and tourists coming here. So we developed an action plan that we submitted to the institutions. Institutions for us are fundamental. And we will hear from the other speakers what exactly was done. I invite you to come here to the podium. Sebastiano Cacciaguerra, good afternoon. And then Mr. Salvato. Mr. Salvato, you are a commander in Cormons. Yes, yes, welcome. So you worked locally in the streets, especially you were monitoring heavy trucks. Which problems did you find? Which lessons have you learned? Now, good afternoon. Now, given your specific question, I answer first. Now, thank you for the invitation, first of all. Thank you. Turn towards the camera. Yes. Enthusiasm is the first word that comes to my mind because there was the will to share and to further develop the network that we set up. A network that is based on a real forms of collaboration and on the exchange of good practices in performing our surveillance tasks. It was possible thanks to the transportation office here in Friuli Venezia Giulia, and now the road police here can monitor the vehicles on the road without having them come to our offices to check for their engines and brake systems and so on and so forth. And this is very important because what we do is ensure safety on the road from the technical viewpoint. We check on-board instruments, on-board machinery, and that's a technical type of surveillance. And on the other, we check all the documents accompanying the goods, especially when it comes to international road transportation, as well as we also monitor the speed and the driving and rest times of our trucks, which is something that our vehicles have to have on board when they circulate within the European Union. And it was beautiful to have this harmonization. And especially, it was beautiful to take into account the differences in legislation. On the one hand, the European Union has provided for some legislation. And this is something that I teach at the University of Bologna, so I know about the European legislation very well. Then there are differences, however, at national levels, with all the problems that the differences entail. And this is why we launched this project. And the most important result was to share our practices and to proceed to a loyal and honest exchange of information. We were able to concentrate on legal differences, on differences from the viewpoint of sanctions and fines. My hope is that in the future we could share education as well, so that our enthusiasm can grow even further. And the final result is a better safety and security of goods transportation in Europe. Thank you. And now I give the floor to Mr. Cacciaguerra on this project. Now, good afternoon. I wanted to show you a different perspective. The perspective of someone who lived this experience from the viewpoint of coordination. Now, coordination is fundamental for all countries, not just for all civil servants. The fact that we have a goods transportation on the road working in the same way all over Europe is fundamental for our safety on the road. But this is also very important for trucks drivers, not just for the population. Our drivers traveling around Europe with their trucks have to be confronted with a single European legislation, but then each member state has its own pieces of legislation over and above the European one. So our poor truck driver doesn't even know what he has to do. He's not sure any longer that he is complying with the national legislation. Maybe he's complying with the French legislation, not with the Slovenian one. So I'm a former director of the transportation office here in the region. This project has taught us that if on one side the European Union provides us with certain orientation indications, then we member states, in the end, we turn them into something else. So we need a bottom-up approach to be able to reconstruct that European Union that we so much talk about. And the second step of this project should not just be an Italy-Slovenia project. That would be almost meaningless. That was a first step that had shown us how many differences there are despite the European legislation. It should be a Europe-wide project. At least we should start with Italy and bordering countries. But in the future, we should have all of the European countries on board because there are differences in terms of sanctions. But we need to have a really harmonized legislation. I've been working on this for many years. I've been working with MUSE, with SECAP. I started on those projects when I was in charge of the transportation office here in the region. So I have some experience in European projects. But European projects must give us dreams, hopes, but in the end, also certainties. And today, these certainties, well, we don't find them. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your experience with us. We thank Commander Salvati, Engineer Salvaguerra, and Anna Sinkovic. Thank you. And we conclude this session with the next project of our Interreg Stories. We're talking about the Salute Strausto project. Martina De Pizzol. She's a psychologist, and she will talk to us together with Nicole, who will be on our podium in a while. At the heart of this project, we have the attempt to build a network of health services which is in common, which is shared by the two countries. Tell us about the project. Now, we are very much satisfied about the final outcome of this project. The project was to set up a multi-professional Italo-Slovenian team sharing protocols for autistic children at an early age. We had many meetings which led to two different results. First, the ESDM treatment, which is a very specific, valuable and important treatment for early stage autism in between 18 and 48 months. And this treatment strengthens and stimulates the area that are most damaged in autism. We've been able to work with Dr. Costanza Colombi, who trained in the US. And this type of education lasts 3 years, and we were able to become certified experts in autism. And we've been able then to develop new models of treatment for these children. Families are also involved in this treatment, as well as schools. So it was really a wide-ranging project. And the second type of result was the education provided by Dr. Hernandez from Spain, and he trained us on augmentative communication, which is an alternative type of communication based on images, so that children who cannot use the verbal modality because they are non-verbal or because they were late in developing the verbal modality could resort to images. And it was very successful. We're very happy to have been able to collaborate with the Slovene team. It has been a growth for both teams, I think. And despite the pandemic, we were able to work rather well. We exploited the online platforms that we had available, and despite the difficulties, I think we were able to continue working even during the pandemic. Nicole and I, and she's here with me, are very satisfied, very much. What remains to be done? Are there further opportunities for further development? For the future, I'm referring to the future. Well, we hope to be able to continue working together on other projects, on other types of training and education. And we hope to be able to collaborate in the future to develop new projects, to have shared protocols, because I think that shared protocols are very beneficial for the children and the families. I give the floor to the speech therapist, Nicole. She will be speaking in Slovene. Nicole Krizmancic, speech therapist.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the invitation. We know each other very well. Can you tell me about your experience within this project? What were the main challenges that you had to encounter, that you had to face in this project? Well, yes, I wanted to talk to you explicitly about the treatments, the therapies. We invited the families of the children who had autism, several degrees, different degrees of autism. We invited them, we involved them in several meetings, regular meetings on a weekly basis. We started by observing the children, asking them to fill out a form, so not just a simple piece of paper. I mean, it's a full report, actually, many pieces of paper broken down into various steps, of course, neurodevelopmental stages, broken down by objectives that we identified on the short, medium, and long term. So we involved all the subjects and respective families. Everybody had to. Everybody was assigned specific tasks. Then, after a few weeks, we would make an assessment. We would update the objectives if needed to start a new cycle of treatment lasting for 12 weeks. And then a couple of more words, if I may, on this method, briefly. Yes, this is a treatment based on playing, so on not a simple game, though. The therapist must find gaming activities at the level of the child involving social relations. As we know, children are always into a playful dimension. They like gaming, and you have to adapt what you propose to the level of the children, taking into account the objectives that you have fixed as a therapist on the basis of this file that you have prepared. So it's not an easy game to play. And also, every time that we attempt to involve the children, that we involve the parents in talking to the children, then the children realize that it's not simple. We filmed also, we shot during these encounters, inviting several experts. We involve them in our training activities to exchange views, point of views. We gather the point of view of experts, and on the basis of these several elements, we then targeted our methods, our activities, and we attempted to improve in as much as possible. Thank you very much indeed for your contribution, Mrs. Kristancic, speech therapist. A fundamental role, really. And now I go back to Italian. So let's continue. We have 3 minutes for your final remarks, final conclusion. If you want to say anything, a final word, a final piece of information, something that you neglected earlier. 30 seconds each for the project that we spoke about at the beginning, CITRES biobanks. What have we learned? This is just the beginning. It's the beginning. This is the beginning of a new job, new cooperation, new fruitful. 5 seconds. Well done. Thank you. Francesco Mosetti Cross-Care. I will attempt to be as brief as possible. So listening to the presentation, but also all the work of the project leads me to believe that the border is artificial. It exists on the maps. But when we citizens, older citizens, children, when we need health care, and we are entitled to the same level of care on either side of the border. And these Interreg projects are very helpful in this, with a lot of effort, but also with a lot of satisfaction. We can be treated as equal patients here and there. And then the last speaker, Katia, I give you back the floor for a short final reflection. Yes, indeed. Indeed, the borders only exist on the maps, and we shouldn't have any border in our minds. A geopark is an instrument for sustainable development of the karst area, and it's the prerequisite, actually, for the next strategic project in the field of the new programming period and also for the future. And then Fortis for a final conclusion. Yes, we at Fortis, we have established an institutional cooperation which will attempt to keep up during the programming period. But as it has been said, we'll attempt to enlarge, extend, because transport do not stop at borders, as does institutional cooperation. So we will do more and more steps. So it's not an end, it's a beginning to have an impact on European legislation in this connection. Martina De Pizzo, last but not least, a final word for your project. So the idea is to continue working together, planning together, sharing projects, shared and common projects, and then thinking about the children we are looking after and their respective families, with an effort to improve altogether. Now, I like very much the slogan saying "Together we can." I say it always in Italian and Slovene. So we can now conclude this panel 4 with the presentation of all the projects that we've had here on stage, and indeed together we can, cooperating, working together between institutions in Italy and Slovenia, a lot can be achieved indeed, as American writer says. So we have to aspire to the infinite and further away, more and more and more. Thank you very much.
Fortis, C3B, Geokarst e Crosscare. Grazie mille, grazie, ecco. Bene, restate in nostra compagnia perché adesso diamo la parola a Marcella che torna al microfono perché ha preparato un altro momento interattivo per voi e poi la giornata continua, bella lunga, bella tosta. Prego Marcella.